looks like we are
We are live.
live on Facebook.
Waiting for everybody else to get live with us.
Oh, yeah, no, that's framed quite nicely tonight.
Chris has been playing with it.
1 minute until showtime.
Fire right here. Oh, I got a phone that is not silenced.
Bad.
It was literally notifying me that we are live. So
But bad, not
it's
silenced.
silenced now.
Okay.
But yeah, so let's see. I need to get myself all situated here.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm doing tonight.
He's a little space cadet tonight.
Maybe just a smidge.
We're doing a Facebook Live event tonight. That's
good.
what you're doing.
Which is number 2.
That's why I'm on the internets tonight.
That's why.
I'm looking at myself on a computer screen.
See, this is why I'm here to help.
With a slight video delay.
It's not slight. It's
Yeah, I know, several seconds.
Oh, dude, I would say it's like up to a minute.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4,
You timing?
2, 1.
It's about 2 to 3 seconds.
Oh, okay. It's usually longer around my end.
It might get longer as the show goes on. We shall see. And now we got everybody. So
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
we got Facebook, we got the Vibe Radio Network, and yeah, good evening, everybody. And also, before I forget, if Facebook watching videos on Facebook isn't your thing, we finally
Got everything on YouTube.
Everything is all cut up on YouTube. So everything that we have streamed on Facebook, right up until this past Monday, you can now find it on YouTube. So,
Yay.
and ideally tonight after we're done with this show, I'll go ahead and get it uploaded, and I'll stay on top of things. I tell myself that, and I guarantee that maybe tonight I'll be good. At some point I'll slip, I promise.
I'll text you a reminder every time.
But yeah, yes, Patrick, happy Monday. Yes.
Happy Monday. Happy Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
Happy we're done with retrograde day.
Yes. But we had a fantastic weekend.
We did.
It was a wonderful weekend. Yeah, that was quite a ton of work putting everything on YouTube.
And now I'm going to ask him to do it with my cooking videos.
I love it.
You're the one who suggested it.
I did.
Yes, you did.
I have no recollection.
I believe that.
You
What?
suggested that we turn my cooking with kittens into YouTube videos.
Was I drinking?
I don't think so this time.
Huh. Okay. Anyways, sure, we can do that.
You are drinking now, though. So
I am drinking
perhaps
now,
that is where
Maybe.
the wires got.
Maybe. But yeah, so we of course this was Friday the 13th weekend. So
Yes.
we had a good sized crew come on out for Friday the 13th up here on Church Hill. So
Yeah.
awesome people braving the chill this weekend. Wasn't too bad, but it was cool.
It was bad by the time we hit the end of the night.
I say that I launched the tour and then leave.
You went inside.
I will say Saturday was worse. I had to thaw my hands out in a vat of hot water at the brewery.
Saturday wasn't great.
Saturday was terrible.
Yeah.
But
It was a great tour. My hands were literally frozen by the time
Saturday
I
was
done.
a fantastic tour time. Beth had a private tour in Chaco Bottom, and then we also did our Ghosts of John Marshall and Spirits of Court End tour over there in partnership with the John Marshall House, which thankfully for that one, at least like the first 30 to 40 minutes of that actually is inside the John Marshall House. So people got to be warm during that, and then we dragged them outside for about a 45 minute to 60
They
minute
had
tour.
hand warmers. We provided them.
Yeah, we provided hand warmers, and I will say everybody seemed to have a good time. So they braved the chill, braved the wind chill on Saturday.
And then Sunday we had a Shadows of Chaco tour, which was pretty much almost full.
Yeah, we had a good sized group last night.
Sunday in January.
Yeah,
Wow.
we normally we don't do Sunday tours in January.
But because of the holiday today, we figured let's throw one on the tour.
Yep. So actually, we had quite a few people come out, and about half the folks were actually in from out of town.
Oh, impressive.
Yeah. So
We'll take it.
yeah, absolutely.
We got to share our history.
Yep, we got to share some haunted history, or rather, Jeffrey shared some haunted history last night.
And then there's just me who's at the coffee shop in the mornings playing tour guide and telling people what to go and do.
Yep.
And I got told I was excellent.
Well, you
Good
are.
job. Yay.
I take my job very seriously.
Golf clap.
All right.
So, but yeah, so anyways, here we are, and after only a week because just the way things are
Yeah,
scheduled. Because next weekend is another big weekend, actually.
It is, and then after that, we're partnering with Hanover Paracon, which is going to be
Hanover Tavern Paracon.
Yeah. At Saturday up at Hanover Tavern. Lots of good speakers coming in. Chris and I will be there with a booth. And then Chris will be at the investigation that night. I, however, will be departing the tavern and coming down to the Poe Museum because we have birthday bash weekend at the Poe Museum where myself, Marcia, and Lee will be helping out with that. And we got 2 tours that night with Marcia and Travis. And yeah.
Yeah, so
busy weekend.
Thursday trivia night at Richmond.
Yes, thank you.
Poe themed because it's Poe's birthday.
Yep. So going to be down there at Richborough on Thursday for that. Friday. Oh, Friday. There's a tour Friday.
Yeah. There's a tour Friday, and Marcia will be launching it. Chris and I will be up at the VIP event at the Hanover Tavern Paracon.
Now, that said, VIP event, you can get tickets for that. So yes,
we'll be telling stories there.
We'll be telling stories and drinking. Sounds kind of familiar, right?
Yeah, they're like, oh no, we're gonna have to get you drinks.
Sure.
Okay.
They actually sound like they want to.
They want to do drunk ghost stories.
Yeah, they want to do drunk ghost stories. We have to be able to drive home at some point, so.
Yeah.
I totally volunteer as Dee Dee. If this happens, I want to watch it.
Well, I'm also I'm not racking up a tab that's big enough to get drunk. So.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Let's
we digress.
Anyway, and then the following weekend, Chris and I are actually going to be out of town because we're going to be down in Orlando for Professional Ghost Tour Guides and Operators Conference.
That's where we'll be, but there will be tours on
going.
Friday and Saturday that weekend. So, but yeah, so...
There's also Monday, Centennial Celebration.
Yes, thank you. A week from tonight is, the Poe Museum Centennial Celebration, which will be at the Dominion Energy Center, the theater there in the middle of town, and
R.L. Stein will be there.
R.L. Stein, and again, I dare not try to pronounce their name.
She's one of the creators of the Wakanda comics.
Yes, the Black Panther. So, but yes, going to be very, very fun event. I think there still should be some tickets available for that as well.
I looked today; they were.
Yep. So
didn't say sold out. So.
Yep. All of that, it's all on the Poe Museum's website, so you can go check out what they got going on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Yep.
Sunday is going to be a little bit more kid-oriented, from what I understand.
Yes.
But hey, Poe's for everybody.
Yes,
so.
it is.
Yep.
All right, with that, we'll actually get to what you guys came for, and that is the Witches 2, Witch Graves and Cemetery Lore.
Yeah, so when we were first putting this together, I did not realize that most all of this is really about dead witches. Or women that were dead women that were rumored to be witches. So, I did not, I started putting things together for this before I even started editing your script. So, just for any clarification that may be necessary, dead witches.
They're all dead.
That is tonight's episode. So
we are going to talk about their memory.
Yeah. Cheers. Yeah, I mean, when we say dead witches, I mean, some of it is, it's all, some of it's rumor and conjecture.
Mm-hmm.
They're...
As most of them were when they were reported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Some interesting tales.
I do feel like we do tend to talk about dead people a lot, though, so it's not that much of a change.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of our
thing.
Our thing, kind of day in, day out.
All right, so...
We talk to dead people.
I talk to dead people.
Please, carry on.
He doesn't.
No, I don't.
All right. So if you're one for wandering cemeteries like we are, you may have on occasion stumbled upon something that is a little out of the ordinary. A grave that seems particularly secure, or perhaps is inscribed with an ominous or puzzling epitaph. Upon closer inspection, or perhaps with a little bit of research, you might find that you have come across the grave of a witch. These graves help provide insight into the past filled with fear of devil worship and sheds light onto historic injustices which continue to haunt our modern world. Well, in the New England witch hysteria a century ago, the stereotypes of wicked witches persisted long afterwards. The legends are not just limited to New England. Across the United States and Europe, you will find evidence of witchcraft lore that lingers in cemeteries in the modern day. But to understand why witchcraft lore continues to haunt us, first we need to understand what sparked this hysteria that left deeply embedded into our psyche. So this is the old world folk beliefs labeled as witchcraft. When we hear the word hag, we think of somebody who is bent, wrinkled with age, and has a rather unpleasant personality. The term is synonymous with the word witch. Both words are used interchangeably to define supernatural demonic beings whose powers enable her to live a long time. On the other hand, witches aren't always evil. In some folklore, hags are benevolent, wise, beautiful, and perpetually young. The historic definition favors the more fearsome of the two identities. In the fearsome definitions, witches were said to have offered their souls to the devil in exchange for their magical powers. Long before the arrival of the Puritan colonists in America and the Salem witch hysteria, witch hunts had begun in Europe. The European witch hunts indirectly started over the use of folk magic practiced in Old World Europe. Nearly every village had someone, often a woman, who was well skilled in using charms and herbs to provoke prosperity or counteract misfortune. For example, sometimes this folk magic was used as a measure to keep a dead relative's spirit from returning or to ward off enemies. Other times it was used to ensure a happy home and promote good harvests. Many of the women who practiced folk magic were regarded as a threat by the men who had religious authority in the community. They were soon demonized for possessing the old wisdom. While women were most often the ones accused, men were sometimes also caught up in the accusations. The religious authorities considered any ritualistic activities outside of their purview as the devil's handiwork, which in turn endangered the health and the livelihood of the community. So our historical information. Witch hunts started in Europe in the 1400s and lasted well into the 1700s. During the height of the European and New England witch hysterias, torture was used on the accused witch to force a confession. After enduring hours of torture and sleep deprivation, accused witches were usually sentenced to death, even if they confessed their guilt and repented. They were granted absolution from the sin if they confessed, but only if they were willing to identify other witches in the community. In America, the belief that witches were evil began with the arrival of the first colonial settlers. Many of the colonists were Puritans who lived under the guise that straying from what they deemed to be a virtuous life to one of sin was a sign of moral weakness, and that could attract the devil. Misfortune was a sign of the devil's workings in the community. Anything that went wrong was regarded as proof that someone had strayed from their Christian values and virtues. A large percentage of the accused were members of the Quaker Church. The Quakers believed that each person held the Spirit of God within themselves. The Quakers rejected trained clergy, organized churches, and formal written doctrine, leading the Puritans and Anglicans to quickly associate the Quaker different belief structure to witchcraft. The Puritans, on the other hand, believed in predestination and original sin. Either you were one of God's chosen and could be saved on Judgment Day, or you were not. While the witch hysteria in New England had subsided by the 1700s, the belief that the misfortune was caused by witchcraft persisted across America. Entering into the 1800s, the belief in witches continued with the arrival of German, Scottish, and Irish immigrants. Many of the arriving immigrants still followed many old world folk beliefs and remedies that were tradition in their homelands. The traditions of the new immigrants seemed bizarre and paganistic to many who lived in America for some time. Many of the folk beliefs involved charms and herbal remedies, which not only offered a way to cure illnesses and end misfortune, but also ensured better luck and health. Droughts, epidemics, poverty, crime, natural disasters were still things regarded as the work of the devil through the power that he gave to witches. Even in the world where scientific and medical advances were promoting a more logical approach to the misfortunes encountered in life, among these populations, however, fear of witchcraft still existed, and it was looked upon by many Christian religions as paganistic and sinful. There's little debate that the magic that was being practiced in the 1800s would be considered white magic, as it was focused on providing positive outcomes. But when this white magic failed to work, hostile feelings usually broke out towards the person who was practicing it, and the person performing the folk magic would then be deemed a witch, a reoccurring theme that continues well into the modern era. Any questions?
No, Patrick. Patrick was proposing a drinking game.
Every time I say witch,
No.
because we'll be
What is
drunk
it?
after 3 minutes.
Every time that, well, actually, it wouldn't be during this show, because right now the cats are actually chill tonight. But,
Yeah, they're sleeping in bed upstairs.
except for Yuna, right here. But every time that Yuna does something, gets herself in trouble, take a sip. Every time Nico looks for food, take a sip. I said we would die.
Every time we have heckin' screams from Vincent, take a gulp.
Yeah.
Vincent is very well behaved during lives.
Yes, he
Yes,
is.
yes, because he usually cuddles with you.
I'm here.
Alright.
It's Nico who tends to get into the trouble trying to get the skeletons to play with them.
I was on a phone call today, and it was a web call. Fortunately, I did not have the camera on because I was sitting there and Nico up right in the middle of my chest. I'm trying to look around him, and he's trying to go nose to nose with me. It would have been...
He just wanted kisses.
Yeah, it would have been quite embarrassing.
You would have been so judged
He is
because you
your
weren't
familiar.
kissing your cat.
He is your familiar.
Yes, yes, he is.
Continuing on that theme.
Now, years after the witch hunts in Old World Europe ended, many people continued to believe that witches could return on the anniversary of their deaths as a revenant, a kind of zombie creature. The revenant witch could use her satanic powers to inflict revenge on the entire community of those who condemned her. Special precautions were always taken to ensure that the dead witch could not return from the grave. In Europe, witches were burned at the stake for their crimes to prevent them from returning as a revenant. In some lands, the witches were hung, dismembered, and burned to ashes to prevent the devil from resurrecting them. The ashes were then placed in a grave. If the witch died while imprisoned, the body had to be placed face down in its grave to prevent it from rising. During the Salem witch trials, the accused witches were hung without being burned, but were always buried face down. The belief that a witch can rise from the dead still exists in modern cemetery lore. The historical information on the background of witches is important to keep in mind when exploring the legends surrounding witch graves. Just as legends are spun of ghosts who are associated with odd-looking grave markers or misunderstood epitaphs, so are the legends of witches. And the cemetery witch lore covered here is just a mere handful of all that exists in America and Europe. Now, our first stop is across the pond in jolly old England, although the story may not be all that jolly, back in the year of 1705. In that year, an English woman named Marjorie Hilton, aka Meg Shelton, was crushed to death against a wall in her home when a barrel fell on her. People believed that her dabbling in witchcraft was evil in that she had died because the devil returned to claim her soul in exchange for the powers he granted her. Meg's grave is marked by a huge rock at St. Anne's Church in Woodplumpton, England. A small modern-day sign designates the rock as her grave marker, and it reads, "Beneath this stone lie the remains of Meg Shelton, alleged witch of Woodplumpton, buried in 1705. Long after her demise, Meg remains known as the Flyde hag because she was an accused witch who was rumored to have unleashed misfortune on her neighbors. Tales describe her as a witch of various evil abilities. Amongst her vast powers, she could shapeshift into animals to steal milk, turn livestock ill, and destroy crops. These beliefs led the townspeople to bury the hated woman head down in a narrow grave to ensure that she could never return from the dead. Unfortunately, to the terror of the terrified residents, that safety precaution did not seem to work. One version of the tale has Meg's arm sticking out of her grave the following morning. Another version has her entire body disinterred lying next to her burial site. According to both versions of the tale, a priest came and performed an exorcism and reburied her corpse. The large rock that still stands on the grave today was placed to prevent her from rising again. The lore claims that walking over her grave 3 times and repeating the phrase, "I don't believe in witches," will cause her hand to resurface and grab hold of your ankle. Tourists who visit St. Anne's Church are told a gentler version. Walking on her grave 3 times and repeating the same phrase supposedly will grant you a wish. So, take your chances, if you will. A wish, or getting grabbed by the bony hand of a long dead witch. Are you feeling lucky?
Big boobs. Just saying.
I'll carry it right through. You read for a while.
Yes, I did.
So, next we are going to move north into Scotland, and we're going to move back a year where we find ourselves in 1704. In that year, the body of a convicted witch named Lilias Addy was buried in the mud along the beach of Torryburn Bay in Scotland. Town council records from the era documented the events of the trial and the location of her grave, and in 2014 her grave site was located using details from these documents. Unfortunately, finding Lilias's burial site didn't prove to be the archaeological trove that they were hoping for. Before we get to that, let's share the tale that led to Lilias's fate. It all started with the overindulgence of another townsperson. One night, a woman had too much alcohol and she began to feel drunk and woozy. Rather than admit that her behavior was the result of excessive drinking, she claimed that Lilias had cast a spell on her. She claimed Lilias's power came directly from her relationship with Satan. Lilias was arrested for witchcraft and for engaging in relations with the devil. After grueling interrogations and imprisonment, she confessed that she met Satan in a cornfield and even gave a description of him. She described him as having hooved feet and being very dark and cold to the touch. She said he convinced her to renounce her baptism, and then he granted her supernatural powers. When asked to identify other witches in the community, she could only point out those who had already been accused. Revealing new names would have spared her great misery and granted her the chance to repent, but since she couldn't name anyone that wasn't already known, she was forced to endure even harsher imprisonment and face her impending execution. Shortly before the day arrived, though, she was found dead in her cell. Most historians feel that she died by committing suicide. It was believed that the only way to stop a witch from returning from the dead was again by hanging them and burning them, but since Lilias took her own life and did not have a chance to repent, extra precautions had to be taken to ensure that she could not return. The tale of Lilias Addy always manages to generate a lot of unease when retold by the locals. The reason is that archaeologists determined that Lilias's body is missing from her grave. Sadly, Lilias's body is not missing because of anything supernatural. It's missing because of greed. In 1852, relic hunters disinterred her grave and sold pieces of her coffin, skull, and skeleton to antique collectors. Her skull ended up on display in the anatomy department at St. Andrew's School. From there, no one seems to know what happened to it. Even her coffin became of interest to relic hunters. Records show that a wooden cane was crafted out of a piece of her coffin and sold to a collector. In the modern day, Torryburn authorities want to erect a witch trial memorial to recognize Lilias as a victim of witch hysteria, an acknowledgement of a chapter of grim Scottish history, and finally giving some dignity to a woman that became a victim of Scotland's witchcraft hysteria. However, despite the written documents providing the facts of Lilias's demise, lore continues to circulate that Lilias is missing from her grave because she was resurrected by the devil. If greed has anything to do with the devil, it certainly seems like a plausible belief. Considering the injustice of being falsely accused and the blatant disrespect of her remains, the spirit of Lilias Addy certainly has every reason to be in a state of unrest.
Probably haunt St. Andrews.
Probably.
Have to check that one out.
I'd do it.
Oh, I know. If you have my head, absolutely. All right, the White Witch of York Harbor. We're going to go back up home to Maine. So this is a coastal village called Old York Harbor, and it has enchanted visitors with its natural beauty since the time it was first established in colonial New England. However, the lore surrounding an 18th century grave in one of the town's oldest burial grounds casts a grim shadow on this part of the town's history. Shortly after Mary Nason was buried in New York Harbor's old burying ground in 1774, rumors began to circulate about her dabbling in white magic. In life, Mary was well known for her ability to cure ailments through her knowledge of herbal medicine. She was also called upon to perform exorcisms. When she died at the age of 29, her husband, Samuel, chose to have her image carved in a way that he probably considered to be stylish and artsy. The carved portrait of Mary shows her with her hair parted in the middle and plied on her head like two balloons, and it was treading high fashion style of the times. And contrary to the modesty that was so conventional during her lifetime, she was depicted partially nude.
Of course.
Of course she was. However, Mary Nason's portrait was only part of what attracts so much attention to her grave. Unlike the other graves in the cemetery, Mary is the only one with a wolf stone covering it. A wolf stone is a gravestone that is in the most literal sense a slab of rock that was placed over the gravesite to prevent wild animals or wandering livestock from disinterring the corpse. Over time, the threat posed by animals in cemeteries was no longer a concern, so the use of wolf stones diminished. And in the modern day, they're a very rare sight. Those that were present in the colonial-era cemeteries gradually became buried in the earth under a built-up of overgrown grass and decomposing vegetation, or they were removed and used as capstones for the stone walls that surrounded the cemeteries. To the modern visitor, a large granite slab covering Mary Nason's grave had no practical purpose, so many assumed it was placed there for an otherworldly reason, and that is exactly why so much of the lore surrounding her gravesite exists. The lore about Mary's grave differs depending on where you hear it. In all versions, she was a witch, and the wolf stone is said to generate heat from her restless spirit. As the widespread versions tell, Mary was a witch who was executed for the evils of witchcraft. The stone slab was placed on her grave to prevent her from rising as a revenant. The crows that are seen in the cemetery are said to be her familiars. On the other hand, the lore told by the locals presents a different character of Mary. The lore insists Mary was a practitioner of white witchcraft, and her benign spirit haunts the cemetery. Teachers at a nearby school say that she sometimes haunts the playground. Her spirit likes to push the swings and leave cut flowers around for the children. The epitaph on her headstone does not suggest she was evil in any way. It was carved in 18th century English script, so it reads, "Here lies quite free from life's distressing care, a loving wife and a tender parent dear, cut down in mists of days, as you may see, but stop my grief. I soon shall equal be, when death shall stop my breath and end my time. God grant my dust and may mingle then with thine, sacred to the memory of Mrs. Mary Nason, wife of Samuel Nason, who departed this life in August 18, 1774, at age 29. Certainly, if she was an evil witch, she would not have God mentioned in her epitaph. And she wouldn't have been buried in the cemetery. Yet the rumors and the lore continue and persist. After all, people can't resist some scandalous gossip.
No, they cannot. So, if Patrick wins the lottery, he says when he passes away, he wants 2 wolf statues on either side of his grave with ravens on the headstone.
Noted.
I'm in.
I want a QR code on my head.
A QR code. Yeah, there's actually people that are doing that, I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So.
I just want a dragon in a forest that I'm going to be buried in. That's all I ask for. It's not much.
Like a real dragon?
If you can find anyone, yes.
Cool.
It doesn't have to fly. Would that be a plus?
Yeah, I mean, flying ones are preferred.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll get right to work on that. Anyways, so next we are going to go to Nebraska. Aurora, Nebraska, where we have, well, the appropriately named Aurora Witch. Now, if you caught our first show about witches, which was actually almost 2 years ago.
It's been a while.
April 12th, 2021. You might remember us chatting about the Witch of Yazoo and her grave. Now, the Witch of Yazoo and the Aurora Witch have a very distinct feature in both of their graves, as they are both surrounded by chains. and both legends claim that the chains surround the graves to keep the witch's evil spirits from returning and carrying out their curse on the community. However, unlike the Witch of Yazoo, the Aurora Witch's headstone bears an epitaph that offers the name, birth date, and date of death. Unfortunately, what was once intended as a respectable memorial for the dead woman has only made her name infamous. The Aurora Witch was a woman named Susan McKinney Gavin. Susan was born in April of 1842 and died at the age of 40 on November 11th, 1882. In every version of the tale, Susan Gavin was a woman whose public behavior was described as unconventional and strange by 19th century standards, though details on this behavior are scarce and unreliable at best. She may have been regarded as strange simply for being a woman who was ahead of her time. The 19th century saw some major changes in the way American women were managing their families and homes. In colonial times, men were regarded as morally superior to women. Nope, just no. But the Victorian era saw a shift in this view. I should have let you read this one. So, women were the great moral managers of the family, and their duty was to ensure a good moral upbringing for children whilst creating a peaceful home life for their husbands. Thus, any behavior or lifestyle that contrasted to the norm was considered unconventional. From the variations in the lore surrounding her, it's likely that Susan was too outspoken for certain members of the Victorian-era community. Now, Susan's lone gravesite is in the northwest corner of Aurora Cemetery, and by most standards would be considered beautiful. It features a white marble obelisk on the rooftop style that was common in the Victorian era. It's a style that suggests home and family. However, Nebraskan lore always describes Susan's monument as odd and protruding. The heavy growth of yellow-green moss covering the north side of the monument has also been deemed bizarre and supernatural when described in the lore, but there is truly nothing supernatural about moss growing on the north side of anything. As the tale goes, the 19th century farming community of Aurora faced a terrible growing season one year. Livestock was struck down by mysterious ailments and several people became ill. The townsfolk believed that their misfortune was the result of a spell cast by the eccentric Susan McKinney. When she refused to rectify her curse, a group of angry community members hunted her down and hung her for practicing witchcraft. Others claim that she was condemned to burn to death for dabbling in witchcraft, but all variations of the tale claim her dying words were a promise to return from the dead and take revenge on the town. The marble monument was erected to warn people of the fate that they would suffer for practicing witchcraft. The grave was enclosed with an iron chain to ensure that her evil spirit would be contained at the burial site if she ever returned from the dead. It is believed by many young people who live in the area today that stepping on Susan's grave will cause them to die in 9 years or by the time that they turn 21. Leaving an offering such as coins or flowers at her grave apparently counters the threat of a premature demise. The chains to Susan's grave were broken and repaired so many times that any future restoration efforts were decided to be futile. Visitors to the cemetery describe overwhelming feelings of sadness and foreboding when they approach her grave. The epitaph on this grave simply states, Susan A., wife of Frank P. Gavin, died November 26, 1882, aged 40 years, 7 months, and 15 days. The monument also marks the grave of an infant daughter named May, who died at 7 months old in 1882. An excerpt from Susan's obituary describes Susan as an estimable lady, beloved hosts of acquaintances, mother of several children, and married to Frank P. Gavin. The obituary explains that she had taken ill, and despite seeming to improve over the weekend, her condition worsened to the point of death. Susan and Gavin were married on Halloween, according to several sources, a month traditionally associated with witches and spirits. The date of their marriage obviously has a lot to do with the idea that she was actually a witch, no matter how unjustified it might be. The biographical information that is available about Susan's life suggests that she was actually a well-liked and respected member of the community. The lore surrounding her demise is completely false, but the feelings of sadness and foreboding that emanate from her gravesite are true. Many people who were completely unaware of the lore surrounding her graves described extreme feelings of despair when approaching the place where she is buried. Which, considering the lore that surrounds her today, I would say...
I'd be pissed.
There you go.
I'd be pissed.
Be a little pissed. Yeah, justifiably so. So, sorry, Susan. We hope that you do find the peace that you so reasonably deserve and desire. Pass this on. Excuse me.
Okay, next we're going to go to the Chesterville Witch. This is Amish country and a little hamlet of Chesterville, Illinois. Here we find the grave of the Chesterfield Witch in a cemetery that is located along the banks of a river and poses a treacherous exploration to those who are not wary of the boundaries. The legend. Approximately 100 years ago, a 15-year-old Amish girl dared to challenge the religious views of her church. She was then accused of being a witch, and her whereabouts became unknown for several days. Shortly after she went missing, she was found dead in a field, apparently of natural causes. She was buried in the town cemetery, and an oak tree was planted over her grave to keep her condemned spirit from wandering. A wrought iron fence was constructed and placed around the perimeters of her grave for added precaution. The people believed that as long as the tree continued to grow and thrive, her spirit would not escape and seek revenge. The exact identity of the Chesterfield Witch is unknown. The tree consumed a portion of the wrought iron fence over the years, and a part of the headstone bearing the name is missing. The tree may fail to serve its protective purpose over time, as at some point a few years ago someone girdled the tree around its base in an attempt to slowly kill it. Whoever committed the act may have unknowingly unleashed something more dangerous than a dead girl's spirit in accordance with the oak tree lore of England. Traveling through the area where an oak tree has been cut can be deadly because you can attract the attention of the tree's vengeful spirit. This belief stems from the religion of the pagan Celts, who believed that the trees possess a deity, and any damage inflicted on the tree would be enough to enrage the spirit to take vengeance on those who harmed it. Such lore is not unique to England. Trees are sacred and considered the host spirits in a number of cultures. The ancient Druids worshipped oaks, and they believed that the tree could possess either good or evil spirits. They believed the oak tree's deity acted as a guide between the plane of the spirit world and the living. Certainly not the sort of beliefs followed by an Amish religion, but the belief that a tree would keep this Chesterfield witch in place is more of a pagan belief than an Amish one. In a funeral art, an oak tree is a symbol of endurance, faith, honor, and virtue. In colonial America and throughout the Victorian era, the planting of an oak tree at a gravesite had nothing to do with the fear of witches. An oak tree was planted at a gravesite to signify respect for the deceased person's conduct in life. Although an Amish village exists in the area, the Chesterfield Cemetery is not an Amish cemetery. The Amish established their burial grounds alongside their churches, and the male members of the community maintain them well. Amish cemeteries are relatively unremarkable in comparison to the American norm. The grounds are devoid of trees, ornamentation. The plots are bare. The very presence of a tree growing at the Chesterfield Witch's gravesite completely rules out the idea that it was planted by the Amish. In addition, the grounds do not look like they were maintained as Amish cemeteries typically are. In fact, some of the gravestones have been consumed by a nearby river. While a lawn to the cemetery may be well maintained, the headstones clearly are not. While some parts of the Chesterfield Witch grave story add up, its connection to Amish history doesn't quite fit. But it still stands as yet another piece of witchcraft legend in the Americas.
Ow.
What did you do?
I twisted the wrong way while I was trying to mess with the fire without standing up.
Okay.
Getting older is great.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
we did wind up trimming a story.
Because, well, the facts didn't line up.
The facts were blatantly out of line. Just very briefly, in editorial review, we found that the story about a couple that was persecuted and considered, for witchcraft, for actually they were said to be of the Mormon religion, which
it is, it is around historically, but At the time period, it was not.
Yeah, because these folks were said to have been persecuted for being Mormons in the 18 teens, whereas the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church as it's more commonly known, was not founded until 1830. As a matter of fact, these folks were persecuted when the gentleman that founded the church, Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith.
He was a prophet.
Yeah. Sorry, the moment going through my head.
Yeah, these folks were accused of being Mormons and being witches for being Mormons when Joseph Smith was only about 10 years old.
He hadn't found the golden plates yet.
Nope, and he had not wrote the Book of Mormon for about another, I think it came out about 5 years after the second of the two individuals, couple, were dead. So, yeah.
Fact check. Gotta fact check.
Fact check. Completely, yeah.
Not sure what they were, but they weren't Mormon.
Nah, no, definitely not. So, anyways, but yeah, it's fun seeing, catching some of that stuff out there. So, anyways, we are going on to Texas. Now, not exactly what you might consider to be witchcraft country, but there's always an exception to the rule. Here we find the ominous grave of Elizabeth Simpson in the Bittick family cemetery bearing a damning epitaph. And remember, as you are passing by, you must die as well as I. Now, it should be noted that
That's dark.
Yeah.
I think he just got possessed.
Yeah. The epitaph I just read to you is actually rife with horrifying grammar. So what I just read you was translated. Let's just say...
Can you give an example?
And remember as yo passing by, yo
so it's done in
must
dialect.
Die as well as I. Yes, yeah, it was...
I love that. That's cool.
I had to read it several times through to actually understand what it was trying to say. So...
I wonder if, like, back then you had to pay for the letter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
So...
yeah. The point is that it was a indisputably grim epitaph. Now, as any historian or cemetery researcher can confirm, prior to the 20th century, the spelling, grammar, and quality of memorial art on a headstone depended greatly on the artistic skill and literacy of whoever carved it. The lore about Elizabeth Simpson and her involvement in witchcraft attracts a steady stream of legend seekers and, unfortunately, a steady stream of vandals. While it is widely told that she was a slave accused of practicing voodoo and was consequently hung for her commitment to such practices, the tree that she was hung from is said to be located down the road from the cemetery.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. Sometimes the tale takes on an added sense of drama. In one instance, after being caught performing witchcraft, she stole a horse and tried to escape. She was caught and hung for the theft. Even after the Liberty Hill Independent newspaper published a story and debunked the lore, her grave still attracts a lot of unwanted attention, and the legend continues to grow. In fact, the Independent noted that Elizabeth's surviving descendants found nothing in their ancestral research to indicate that she was a slave. As a matter of fact, she may have actually been a white woman. So,
I do love that they were more concerned about the horse theft than the witchcraft.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. But, well, that's how...
Progress, guys.
Legend and... Yeah. There's something to that, actually. So, many take the epitaph on Elizabeth's grave to be a literal warning and visit the cemetery to show off the fact that they tempted death and survived. Pieces of her headstone are chipped off for keepsakes and proof that they cheated death. The damage broke her headstone in half eventually, and prior to this, her headstone had actually been stolen on one occasion. Once it was recovered by police, Elizabeth's descendants eventually elected to have it moved to the front of the cemetery with the idea that it would be more visible and try to deter further theft and vandalism, but moving the marker to a different section did little to help. Recently, a gate and fence were erected to keep trespassers away at night. Elizabeth Simpson died in 1864 at the age of only 30 years old. If you should go to visit her grave someday, be sure to give it the respect that it deserves.
Have we done an episode on grave markers?
We have not, but
No.
I
Really should.
There's
Especially
certainly certainly material.
we live in America, the place of just excellent grave markers. Like, we have some good ones.
We do. All right, we're gonna pop back over to Illinois to St. Omar Cemetery's witch grave in Ashmore. This is a very different kind of epitaph for you. Marcus A. Barnes, born January 14th, 1837, died December 6, 1881. Caroline, his wife, born January 23rd, 1858, died February 31st, 1882. Did you catch that last part? Caroline Barnes died on a day that never existed. February never had 31 days, nor not even in a leap year. But the date on the monument isn't the only thing peculiar about Caroline's grave. The appearance of her marker is not a traditional obelisk or headstone. The marker bears a non-existent date is a large sphere topping off a pile of wood with acorns, oak leaves carved into it. Many people say the sphere is supposed to be a crystal ball sitting atop of a pyre. While the other headstones in the cemetery face the east to west direction of Christian burials, Barnes's marker faces north to south. In addition, Caroline's gravesite rests in a cemetery that is now located in a ghost town. Add it all up and you can see why so much lore has surfaced about this grave. The story is that Caroline was accused of witchcraft, tried, and hung for her dealings with the devil. Following the hanging of her body was to be burned to ashes. However, when the time came for her to be hung, she didn't die and was buried alive.
Well, whatever works.
As she was put in the grave, she vowed to return on the anniversary of her death. The fictional date of the death was put on the stone as a precaution to prevent her from returning from the dead. Kind of hard to come back on the anniversary of your death if it doesn't exist. That said, in some versions of the tale, Caroline was able to dig her way to the surface of the grave and escape, never to be heard from again. Sounds like some Kill Bill stuff there. The stone surface of the crystal ball on her grave is said to glow on a moonless night. Many who visit the gravesite say it's impossible to photograph the memorial. Cameras will only pick up distortions or blank photos. It appears that some have taken to practicing witchcraft rituals on Caroline's grave, as evidenced by wax candle drippings on the top of the ball. Aside from rumors and conjecture, little is known about Caroline, let alone her legacy as a witch. But what is known is that Caroline was one of the last remaining citizens to die in St. Omar. Most of Caroline's neighbors had already departed to other towns in hopes of finding greater prosperity. It's also known that Caroline's actual date of death was February 28th, as it is recorded in the Cole County death records. It could be that the incorrect date on her marker was a mistake that would have been too costly to correct. But what about the north-south direction of the monument? While different from other graves in the cemetery, the burial direction is not something that is generally associated with witchcraft. The unfortunate truth is that Marcus's cemetery monument has been victimized by vandals many times, and at least on one occasion it was found completely knocked over. It's most likely that it was placed in the wrong direction when it was resurrected into an upright position. Today, the Omar Cemetery is the only remaining evidence of the town by the same name. If you stop by Ashmore, Illinois for a modern-day visit, keep an eye out for the grave with a date that doesn't exist, but treat it with the respect that the burial deserves.
Patrick says, why not, instead of returning on the anniversary of my death, say, I will return on a random date when you least expect it. Good luck, losers.
On birthday, she's got a lot of them to choose from.
Yep. So,
Like, she literally could have 365 to 66 any other days.
Yep.
So, we are going to move back to the south, and we're going to go all the way to Tallahassee, Florida. I don't know, that's a place that we've talked about before. Maybe it wasn't
I
Erie
don't know. It's
Paddles.
a place a lot of people talk about in general.
This is true.
I mean, I know we got ghost stories. I just don't know if we've actually talked about them.
Yeah.
Because we got the books.
Yeah, and we actually did a Haunted Florida episode.
Yes, we did.
And then there was some Florida in the Erie Paddles episode. Maybe we've talked about Tallahassee before. In any case, here we will find the Old City Cemetery. And this cemetery has another north-south grave, with some people giving it the same associations to witchcraft as the Carolyn Barnes one that we had just talked about. But unlike Carolyn's grave, many have seen the spirit of a young woman actually sobbing at this particular gravesite. Supposedly, the young woman's spirit is not at rest because she was poisoned by a relative who suspected her of being a witch. She is said to have suffered miserably before dying. The name of the alleged witch is Elizabeth Bessie Budd Graham. There's a lot of Elizabeths on this episode.
Well, it's the time period. She's a very popular person.
Her marker is a 12-foot high memorial situated in a non-traditional direction within the confines of a short mortar wall that marks the boundaries of her burial plot. But the north to south direction of her monument is not the only reason people believe that she was a witch. The obelisk was erected by Bessie's husband, John. It has several artistic features that have led to rumors about witchcraft in John's marriage to Bessie. The rumors claim that she bewitched John into marriage. Since the love spell could not be broken after her death, he remained so distraught that he spent his fortune to immortalize her with an elaborate monument. Most of the lore maintains that visiting her grave will give her reason enough to haunt your dreams every night. People leave offerings of coins and seashells in the large granite vase that sits in the center of Bessie's burial plot. Seashells are left at Bessie's grave by visitors both as a symbol of their pilgrimage and as an offering to ensure good luck and prosperity. Others say that if you look in the vase, you will see the reflection of a dark soul gazing back at you. The poem quoted in Bessie's epitaph is the main reason so much negative lore is in circulation. People tend to notice the poetic verses first before even reading the first half of the epitaph, which gives Bessie's biographical information. The poetic verses are from our beloved Edgar Allan Poe, and from specifically...
I know that guy.
Yeah, specifically from his poem Lenore. Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll. A saintly soul floats on the Stygian river. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, an anthem for the queenliest dead. That died young, a dinge for her the doubly dead, in that she died young. Undoubtedly intended as an expression of love and grief over the loss of his young wife, John had no idea how his choice of poetry would corrupt Bessie's Christian reputation.
Oh dear.
Bessie did, indeed, die young, at only 23 years old. She was actually roughly the same age as Poe's wife, Virginia, when who passed away at the age of 24. Now, many believe that the queenliest dead means that Bessie was queen of the dead. Others say that the broken golden bowl refers to driving a stake through a vampire's heart. Broken golden bowl. Big stake? I don't make the connection, but maybe it's just me. But not all that is said about Bessie is negative. Some of the lore claims that she was a good witch who practiced spells for love and protection. The first lines of her epitaph do better in upholding her virtue. Elizabeth Budd Graham, wife of John Alexander Graham and daughter of David C. and Florence J. Wilson. Born October 19th, 1866, died November 18th, 1889, a dutiful daughter, a devoted mother, and a loving and faithful wife. As for the non-traditional north to south direction that the grave supposedly faces, chances are is that it doesn't denote the exact location of her grave within the plot. Large obelisks such as Bessie's were erected as the central monument of several grave sites within a family burial plot. The central monument does not designate the direction that the corpse faces. Each name of the family member would be inscribed on a different side of the obelisk, while the actual grave sites will be located within the perimeters of the plot, and sometimes accompanied by individual headstones. Most likely, John Alexander Graham had every intention of spending his eternal rest next to Bessie in the family burial plot, but eventually he remarried and was buried in another state with his second wife. Goes on that the letters IHS adorn an area near the crest of the monument above a crown and cross. The symbols all denote Christian faith in a heavenly afterlife and would not appear on the grave of anyone practicing the evils of witchcraft. The letters IHS denote the first three letters of Jesus' name using the Greek alphabet. They stand for Iota, Eta, and Sigma. This crown and cross denote the deceased's faith in Christ and the kingdom of heaven. According to Find a Grave, which is a fantastic resource, I must say, Elizabeth Bessie Budd Graham died of heart failure, not poisoning, and the info in her obituary further backs up her virtuous life as a devoted wife and good mother. The top of the obelisk has huge plumes of feathers like those that were used to adorn horse-drawn funeral carriages. Cemetery symbolism states that because of their lightness and their association with wings, feathers can be a symbol of the ascent into the heavens. Heaven is not a destination that a witch was expected to reach in the afterlife back in the day. Bessie's husband truly saw an angelic quality in his young wife and not anything diabolical. Many people believe that the lavish decor of the obelisk was meant to signify how vain Bessie was in life. Oh my God.
They read too much into things.
While the elaborate ornamentation might appear gaudy to us, during the era that she died, it most definitely was not so. The artwork on monuments often went over the top in Victorian times and was regarded as a respectable way of showing the depth of love felt for the deceased. Even in modern funeral art, each symbol and letter put on a monument costs money, and more decoration equals higher costs. While the modern trend is towards practicality, during the Victorian times, people were expected to spend a sizable amount on their loved one's funeral expense and graveside memorial.
Especially horse-drawn hearses.
Yep. As for Bessie not being at rest, well, she may not have been poisoned. She might be distraught at some of the modern-day rumors that surround her, though. As we noted before, respect.
Always respect. Alright, so we're going to go way back in time to Margaret Jones, which is a witch execution that took place in 1648. Of course, Bridget Bishop was the first to be executed in the hysteria of the Salem witch trials. She was not the first to ever be executed for witchcraft in Massachusetts colony. That person was actually sent to the gallows tree in Boston, and her name was Margaret Jones, the wife of Thomas Jones of Charleston. Witchcraft was recognized by the very early laws of Massachusetts. If any man or woman be witch that hath consulted with or has a familiar spirit, they shall be put to death. Such was the law, and such was the teaching of the minister of the Bay Colony. However, Maine was not alone in this belief system. Belief in witchcraft was common in Europe, and there were 3 years immediately preceding the persecution of Margaret Jones that scores of people had been convicted and put to death in England. Stories of the grave situation overseas led the people of Boston to fear for their safety. Perhaps there may be witches among us, they thought. Perhaps our neighbors are possessed of evil spirits, and they began to look around them, to watch each move, to wonder at its significance, until in their own disordered minds was born the bloody delusion of witchcraft. In the town of Charlestown, the good woman gave her time and her skill to bring health and cheer into the homes of the sick. Like many other housewives of her day, Margaret Jones was skilled in making cooling drinks, soothing remedies from herbs and berries, and she visited her neighbors prescribing their ailments. But soon there were whisperings. Whence came her skill? How could she brew these simple drinks, yet effective? Such wonderful cures. Something's wrong. Something's mysterious. Something that we must watch out for. The whisperings grew until they reached the ears of the magistrates, and in the early spring of 1648, a good woman and her husband were arrested and thrown into the Boston jail. The jailer seized her, examined certain marks on her body, and insisted that they are the marks of a witch. And then, when the courts come in, we find the following order set down upon the books. This court binges disarose the same course that which hath been taken in England for the discovery of witches, by watching, may also be taken here with the witch now in question. And therefore do order with that a strict watch be set about her every night, and that her husband be confined in a private room and watched also. Here is the evidence that the magistrates were guided by the bloody news coming from the other side of the Atlantic, where Matthew Hopkins, witch hunter, was sending dozens of innocent men and women to the gallows. And here so in Boston, the witch watcher is appointed, and in the night of April 18th he begins his work. What does he see? In his eye, more than enough, he peers into the dirty room where Mrs. Jones is confined. Perhaps he was crazy, perhaps he had too much to drink, or perhaps he's just a liar. But he says he saw a child in Margaret Jones's arms, that when he started in, the child ran into another room, and then vanished into thin air. Then there is the other evidence. She was found to have such a malignant touch that many persons upon whom she laid her hands were taken with deafness or vomiting or other violent pains or sicknesses. Then the extraordinary violent effects of her medicines were brought up against her. In vain she protests that they're simply herb teas. She used anise seed in one of them. The magistrates, even the level-headed John Winthrop, seized upon it. If it is just anise seed, how can she explain the marvelous potency of the brew? Others come forward and assert that she told those who did not take her medicines that they would never be healed. John Winthrop recorded that their diseases and hurts continued, with relapses against the ordinary course, and beyond the apprehension of all physicians and surgeons. Frantically, Margaret denies this, but it's too late. Her anger, fear, and frustration are also in turn used against her at her trial. After all, an innocent woman would have no reason to be upset. And so she's found guilty and sentenced and led over to the hanging place on June 25th, 1648. When the terrible thing is ended, there comes the final evidence against her. Evidence so overwhelming, so incontrovertible, that the Winthrop sets down in record. The same day and hour she is executed, there is a very great tempest at Connecticut, which blew down many of the trees, etc. Meanwhile, her husband has been released, and he now begs the captain of the ship, Welcome, at anchor off Charlestown, for passage to Barbados, so that he can get away from the hated place. But the captain refuses, and some hours later the vessel begins to roll strangely. There are 80 horses aboard her, and their constant shifting probably caused the ship to move. But the captain and the crew said the trouble was due to witchcraft. Jones has bewitched the ship, they say, and so the unfortunate man is dragged forth and hurried to the prison again. The ship, says Winthrop, moved no more, and Jones was afterward released. Okay, that's it.
That was it for tonight. And we do have a Lulu. I think you can see her just down here at the bottom of the screen, barely.
I'm sorry.
A little shocky? Or
No.
you just surprised her?
I surprised her. Lulu's not one to like having things coming down from above.
So, we have a kitty appearance tonight. Thank you, Lulu.
I haven't seen her in weeks.
Yeah.
It's been cold.
She's finally forgiven us for puffing her earlier. She gets a daily puff for her asthma.
Yep. The Lulu does have some asthma, but we take care of that, don't we? Much to your dismay.
And occasionally Mommy and Daddy need forgiveness.
Yeah. So. But anyway, so yeah, that was it for tonight. And we do, again, we got all the stuff going on next weekend.
Quite literally all the stuff.
Huh?
Quite literally all the stuff.
Quite literally all the stuff between all the stuff with the Poe Museum and his birthday and the Centennial celebration and everything that we are doing also up at Hanover Tavern. It is going to be an awesome weekend all around.
Yep.
So, yeah.
But we will be back at the end of the month on the 30th with Haunted Colorado.
Yep, that'll be 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
So, yep, between now and then, we got everything next weekend, and then we're doing that convention in Orlando.
Yep.
And
then
yeah.
after that, we're going to have 2 haunted executive mansions because, well, I went down a rabbit hole.
So, yes. executive mansions, as in like the where
Governor.
where governors live, where presidents live, that type of thing.
Yep.
And there is plenty to talk about on that topic. So I think we've touched on a couple of them over the years. Of course, we talk about our own executive mansion here in Richmond all the time.
But yeah, so we're going to do part 1 and part 2 in February because, well, it's President's Month.
Yeah. So we're going to go with that. But let's see. Yeah. Yeah. Cats hate medical treatment.
Hi, baby.
Granted, most people hate medical treatment too. Cats just also have the disadvantage of not really being able to communicate when, yeah. So, but yeah, so yeah, Haunted Colorado, that's going to be a cool episode. And yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff coming up. And don't forget, we got the tours as well. We're, again, every Friday, Saturday. Of note, in the next month, I think we are actually, this is tentative, have to get it posted, but we are planning on doing a haunted dinner.
It's back!
Haunted
Yay!
dinner back on Saturday, February 18th. If you go to look for it on our website, you will not find it because it is not posted yet, but I am working on that, and I hope to have it posted sometime this week.
Dessert.
Yes, as if I don't already have a full enough week as it is. So we'll see if that happens, but it will be posted sooner than later, and it's usually a hot ticket, and I expect that it will particularly be a hot ticket since our last haunted dinner. It'll be almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years since we had our last public haunted dinner. We've done a few.
Oh yeah, we have
private.
We've done a few private ones, but yeah. Yep.
Dessert.
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 Peanut pie and our brownies. Everything's good at Patrick Henry's.
It is. But yes, so haunted dinner is coming back right now. That is the only one we have on the calendar. But yeah, Chris will get that posted and get that live so tickets can be on sale.
Yep. It's going to be a little bit of a different structure than what we did in the past, but still.
It's
back. It's back. It's going to be a haunted dinner. We're looking forward to it. And then our next time at John Marshall House, which again, very, very limited number of tickets are available for those events, is going to be February 25th. So between now and February 25th, we have our classic rotation of tours that we're going to be doing, and hope to see you there. Hope to see you at hope to see you on a tour. Hope to see you at the Poem Museum. Hope to see you at Hanover Tavern. All of the above, whatever you can make it to. Never a bad time to get out and do some spooky stuff.
Yes.
So
with that, we will leave you all and see you again on the 30th if we don't see you in person at one of these events. We hope you all have a good night.
have a good one, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.